Hello everybody, welcome back to another video from Jay Bowman on the Kodamo Mask1 Bitmasking Synthesizer. On the last video I demonstrated how to come up with a simple kick and snare patch, and I thought it would be useful to come up with another video showing some of the more experimental side of the Mask1 synthesizer and some of the unique potential of the bitmasking synthesizer engine. So the kick and snare patch, although it's a nice sound, is probably a sound that you could come up with on many synthesizers, whereas the patch I was just playing is a more experimental patch. I wouldn't say it's the most musical patch, but hopefully it will show off some of the features of the Bitmask engine and also some of the features that are new in the latest firmware, which came out in March 2024. So if I just show you briefly what's going on in the patch, as you can see from the flashing lights on the buttons, the ARP is working there. If I go into the ARP, you can see it's just playing one octave at 130 BPM. You can also see, and this is a new feature as of the latest firmware, that both LFO1 and LFO2 are going. You can see the lights which show both the wave shape that's being used and also the frequency of those LFOs. So if I just go into LFO1, you can see that it's modulating frequency with a down ramp. LFO2 has got a random wave modulating mask. Now what I'll do is I'll just turn those off, because one of the interesting features of this patch is that although there was an ARP going, which I will turn off, and there were LFOs going, a lot of the movement that you hear is coming from the oscillator itself. So there's only one oscillator playing, and that's oscillator 1, and that is using mask shape 278. Now in itself, this is a new feature that came out with the latest firmware, because when the Mask1 was initially released, you had 256 mask shapes. Now that's been doubled as of the latest firmware to 512. So number 278, that is a new feature. So what I'll do is I'll just raise the filter cutoff so you can hear the just the oscillator on its own. So you'll see from the oscilloscope that it's quite a discontinuous wave shape, and you can hear it's got this rhythmic quality. Now that's the case with a lot of the masks, particularly as you get higher up into the numbers, they've got this discontinuous shape when they're played lower down in the pitch range. Now one of the interesting features of the Mask1 is the sheer range, the tonal range that you've got for each oscillator. From say concert pitch, you can go down or up 5 octaves within each oscillator. So that's what that mask sounds like if I play it at middle C. I've just reduced it down to 5 octaves below, and I'll play it an octave further down as well. So here you can hear this discontinuous, almost percussive quality it has, which I think is an interesting feature of the bitmasking engine, and particularly a lot of these higher value masks. And a couple of things I want to point out about that. By default, the oscillators are set up in a kind of virtual analog way, so I think they've got a bit of pitch variation, which you can hear if you just put it on a standard saw wave and play two oscillators together, you'll hear the drift. In fact, why don't I do that? So I've got oscillator 1, oscillator 2, so they're just both by default on saw wave. So as I bring in the second wave there, you can hear the kind of phasing that you get. So that's just one oscillator on its own. Then as I bring in the second oscillator, so obviously if it's a purely digital synth, but if the oscillators were just set up in a digital way, you wouldn't expect to hear that phasing. So obviously it's done to give it this very pleasing virtual analog sound. But from my perspective, I think if you were really wanting to explore these bit masks and their kind of unique qualities, it would be quite handy to have the option where they don't phase and there's no kind of virtual analog quality to them at all. They just stay very stable, particularly when you get down into the lower ranges where they've got this percussive quality. Now another feature is you hear each time I press the key, you'll hear that the phase of the wave starts in a different place. And again, I think that is because in the interest of making this a virtual analog synth, the oscillators seem to be free running, which is great for probably for what most users want. But if you really wanted to explore this unique feature of the kind of bit masking oscillators and the way they work, particularly the percussive quality, it would be good if you had an option to set it so the phase of the oscillator would start with key press, because that would make it more consistent rather than getting this random phrase. Now actually the patch that I just played uses this random quality, the fact that when you press the key you don't know whether you're actually going to hear anything or whether the audible quality of the oscillator won't come in until later. The patch uses that, but I think it would also be useful to have the ability just to start it so that you get the same phase of the oscillator playing each time. Now, the last thing I want to say about this bit mask quality is I think it'd be really interesting to be able to use the bit mask shape as an LFO wave shape. I think that would give some really unique and interesting qualities for modulating all the features, all the parameters that you can with the synthesizer, if you could use that really unique bit masking oscillator shape. That would be great. And taking that a step further, I don't know if this is even possible, but if you could then, because you can already modulate pitch using the LFOs, if you could use the bit mask shape of oscillator 1 to modulate the pitch of oscillator 2, then you would get FM, particularly if that could be key tracked obviously, then you would get kind of FM sound, which I think would open up the sound design potentials of this synth, which are already very large, but it would open them up exponentially. I mean, I had no idea if that can be done in the future firmware update, but if it could be, that would be really exciting, I think. Okay, and you see how much, let's see how much variety there is just by scrolling through the bit masking shapes. You see how much tonal variety there is there. And I'm playing this oscillator quite low down in the frequency scale, so this is not how these oscillators are supposed to sound, so to speak. If I raise the pitch, then you can see they've got the audio quality rather than the rhythmic quality. There's just a lot of potential there. these are the high masks which were released in the latest firmware from 255 up to 511. Yeah, there's a lot to dig into there. Okay, I think the last feature that's specific to the latest firmware that I want to show off is the filter. To start with, I think the filter on this synth sounds great. It's completely digital, but it's got a lot of character. Let's try with some resonance on that. It definitely helps in getting a kind of less digital, more analog, evil type sound out of the synth. So as of the latest firmware, as well as the standard 12 dB per octave filter that came with the Mask1 when it's released, you now have the option at the end of the parameters. You have what's called the extra features. So by default it's on 12 dB per octave. But then you've also got 24 dB per octave. But then if you carry on scrolling, you've got low pass fixed filter options and high pass fixed filter options. So this adds, if you go into these options, essentially you have the 6 dB per octave filter plus a fixed frequency low pass filter, and as you can go up through the options, of the low pass options, the higher the number, the lower the frequency of that fixed frequency low pass filter is. And then you've got the same but the other way round for the high pass options. So here I have a 6 dB per octave low pass filter by default in the main filter, plus a high pass fixed frequency filter as well. And the higher I go up through here, up to 7, which is the highest fixed frequency. Now that is a really useful feature, and I think just having it on 1 or 2 helps take out a lot of the lower end crud that you can get. This synth generates a lot of low frequency content, so it's very useful to have this option. So that is all the new features in the latest firmware that I wanted to show off with this patch. It doesn't cover the whole thing, all of the new features by any means, but I just thought it'd be useful to show those off. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you again for another video, possibly on another